Welcome back, everybody. We wanted to mark a historic event that occurred on this date way back in 1963. I think some of us remember it, some of us were there, and some of us weren't, but it's an important thing to note. Back in 1963, on this day, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered one of the most powerful speeches in American history. I thought we'd go back a little bit in time and consider why this speech was so significant and why it changed so much. It was on August the 28th that over 250,000 people showed up for the March on Washington. Now, the march was there as a mass support for the passage of the civil rights legislation that had been proposed by President Kennedy. The civil rights legislation would be 100 years after the Civil War. The Emancipation Proclamation by President Lincoln had led to the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and yet, 100 years later, Dr. King would note that we are still not free. Well, historians tell us that on that date, 12 hours before the march, Dr. King did not have a speech ready. So on that fateful day, Dr. King began his speech with quotes from great American documents, 7 years ago, and a joyous end to the long night of their captivity. What about life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness? And the final one, let us not wallow in the valley of despair. But in the middle of that speech, Dr. King put the text down and he just began preaching. What was it? Was it the text? Was it his delivery? Was it the message? Or was it the years of frustration that made it such an iconic moment? He said, I have a dream that my 4 little children one day will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. The next day, a lot of things changed. That year, he was named Man of the Year by Time magazine, and the year later, he was the youngest person ever awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The copy of the text, he handed it to a young man named George Raveling, who became a great basketball coach. And to this date, Coach Raveling still has a copy of that speech because he says it belongs to all of us. And that's the way it was back in 1963. We'll be right back with more on Coastal Living right after this.
You're watching Coastal Living on KZTV, the only lifestyle show made in the Coastal Bend for the Coastal Bend.
Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back.